and welcome to Trails Worth Hiking, the show that brings you some of the most interesting backpacking and trekking routes in the world. I'm your host, Jeremy Pendry. In the first part of the show, we bring you the story and history of a trail. Then we tell you what it's like to hike the trail and how you can do it. On this episode, we go far north, but not in North America, where I live. We hop across the pond to go to Northern Europe, like way north, all the way to the Arctic Circle for part of this hike, to one of the largest remaining wildernesses in Europe, where we'll hike more than 450 kilometers or almost 300 miles, staying in huts or camping as we cross the Arctic tundra on the Kungsleden, or the King's Trail in Lapland, northern Sweden. Welcome to the show, everyone. I have just gotten back from the first ever Trails Worth Hiking backpacking meetup at Point Reyes National Seashore in Northern California. Thank you so much to everyone who came to the event. Around 20 of us gathered to go backpacking together at Point Reyes. I was really humbled and honored that so many of you came to the event. We had backpackers of all ages, from a toddler all the way up to seniors. We had people of all experience levels, from first-time backpackers to seasoned veterans. We got some pretty good weather, and Alamir Falls, the big waterfall that flows onto the beach near Wildcat Camp where we camped, was running pretty full, which was great to see. I've posted some pictures of the event on the Instagram account. I had a really great time, so thanks again to everyone for coming and for listening to the show. Thanks also to Outdoor Herbivore for sponsoring the event and providing some giveaway meals, which were quickly snatched up, I might add, and several gift cards that we gave away as prizes. I would like to do more of these kinds of events wherever you live, or just go backpacking or even day hiking with listeners. So if you've got an idea for a backpacking meetup, or a backpacking trip, or even just a day hike, or hopefully a series of day hikes if I have to travel, reach out to me at trailsworthhiking@gmail.com or direct message me through the Instagram account. I do have lots of travel and hiking already planned this year, but I'd love to figure out how to do more of this. So reach out and we'll see what we can do. If you couldn't make the Point Reyes meetup, there is another opportunity to go backpacking with me coming up. In June, I will be in Southern California at Big Bear Lake to hike the Highlander event. If you've been a hut-to-hut or refuge-to-refuge kind of hiker, but have never done wilderness backpacking and are interested to learn, this is the event for you. Or even if you are a backpacker already, this looks to be a really fun event, particularly if you want to try a more social backpacking experience. So what is Highlander? Highlander is fully supported backpacking. All the meals and beverages are provided and included. The meals are customizable to special dietary restrictions. I was able to check a box when I signed up, showing that I have a vegan diet and that I will get the food that I will enjoy. You only carry one day of food at a time, which makes it a little bit easier to be carrying less. Campsites are provided at campgrounds, which have real facilities like bathrooms and water. There might even be showers at some of them, but don't quote me on that. There are experts who will be providing talks on various backpacking-related subjects. There'll be live music at the end of the event. There are some workshops, and there are even daily yoga sessions that you can participate in. You'll get a detailed map, you get GPX tracks, and there are preparation webinars that you can participate in advance if you're a little nervous about doing backpacking and want to make sure you understand what it entails. There's first aid and medical staff there in case of emergencies as well. And if you don't own backpacking gear because you've always done trekking type of adventures, they will rent the gear you need, or of course you could always rent it from your local REI or something like that as well. One of the things that's really cool about this event is that there are various options for how long of an event you want for yourself. There are 1, 2, 3, and 5-day versions of the event. So if you only have a weekend, you could do the 2 or the 3-day version, or even just the 1-day version. I'm going to be doing the 5-day version. There's actually 2 different 5-day versions. I'm going to be doing what's called the Hercules version starting on June 17th. But if you only have the weekend available, you could sign up for a shorter version. But here's the key. No matter which event you do, you can hike with me. The starts are staggered so that everyone finishes the event together. So no matter which version you do, you hike with everyone who is already on the trail. So if you, for example, did the 2-day version, I will have already hiked 3 days when you start. And we would still be able to generally hike together on the trail or meet up in camp in the evening. The distances are reasonable but challenging. The area is very beautiful, and Trails Worth Hiking listeners get a 20% discount off the registration fee with the discount code Jeremy20. Jeremy in all caps, 20. So Jeremy 20. If you register with the Jeremy20 discount code, it will not only get you a cheaper registration fee, but will also help the show out. If you decide to register, send me an email and let me know which version of the event you're doing so I can look out for you and try to connect with you on the trail or at least in camp in the evening. I'll put a link to the Highlander website in the show notes. Just to be clear, I haven't been to this event before, but I'm going to give it a try. So if you'd like to join me, I'll see you there. All right, let's do our Walking the Walk segment where we talk about listeners who have hiked a trail after listening to an episode. I wanted to mention this time that Thea Elliott of British Columbia hiked the Rota Vicentina in 2022 in Portugal after hearing an episode about it. I believe that was episode 10. Thea recently reached out to tell me she had hiked that trail. She said it was one of the most incredible trips of her life, and she had learned about it on the show. So awesome that Thea did that a couple of years ago and really enjoyed it. One other housekeeping note, I wanted to mention regarding the Kepler track episode from a couple episodes back that our guest, I believe, may have mentioned that hiking the Kepler track clockwise was the more popular way to do it. Joe Goldstiver Lennon reached out to me and she made clear that it's actually anti-clockwise or counterclockwise, as we would say it here in the US. That is the easier and more popular way to hike the Kepler track. So I just wanted to make that clarification. It's not clockwise, it's anti-clockwise or counterclockwise. Although, as we talked about on that episode, you could hike it either direction, but it's the anti-clockwise or counterclockwise direction that's most popular. All right. On this episode, our guest is Bob Delaney. Bob has a YouTube channel called John's Dad Hikes. We'll talk about that name and why he calls it that with Bob. So Bob's a really good person to have on to talk about the Kungsleden because he spent time in Sweden twice in his youth as an exchange student. So speaks Swedish and has spent a lot of time there before he went and hiked this trail. For me, it's an interesting trail to cover because I have actually been to Sweden and spent some time there. Back when my kids were younger, we did home exchanges to travel to Europe several times. And what that means is we would go to someone's home in Europe, and at the same time, they would come to our home here in California, and they would stay in our home while we stayed in their home. We typically exchanged vehicles as well, so that we would be able to drive their car, and they would be able to drive our car to see things. And we did this several times over the years. And it was a really, really great way for a family of 4 to be able to travel to Europe very affordably, even during the high season, and to stay in real neighborhoods where we got to feel like we were part of a community and not just being in a tourist district. Anyway, in 2016, a family from outside of Stockholm, Sweden, asked us to do a home exchange. And knowing absolutely nothing about Sweden, we said, sure, why not? And we went. We stayed in their home near Stockholm. We spent a lot of time seeing the area where they lived and also in Stockholm. They actually had a summer home that was pretty far north in Sweden, and we went and stayed in their summer home as well. We went hiking in a national park and climbed a peak up in northern Sweden. And I don't remember exactly how it came up, but somehow while we were there, I learned about the Kungsleden. And it has been in the back of my mind ever since. So when Bob reached out, I jumped at the chance to do this episode. Let's talk about where this hike is. Not only is it in Scandinavia, in Sweden, but it is in northern Sweden. It is in what's called Lapland. Today, that area is 2 counties of Sweden. It's very far north. It's mountainous in significant part. Lapland is 1/4 of the land of Sweden, but only a very small part of the population. Today, only about 91,000 people live in all of Swedish Lapland out of the 10.5 million people in Sweden. So think about that. It's 1/4 of the land, but only 91,000 people out of more than 10 million. Lapland, the region, is actually bigger than just the Swedish Lapland section of it. The Russian Empire in the early 19th century had carved out a portion of that, and that part of it is now part of Finland today. So the ecosystem is broader than just the Swedish part of it. The climate in Lapland is subarctic in the south part of it and polar in the north. One thing that's interesting about the Swedish part of Lapland is that it's inland. So it's not on the coast like other parts of Sweden or parts of Norway. So it's much colder than Norway at similar latitudes because it doesn't have that effect of moderating temperature that an ocean can have at higher latitudes. One thing that's really intriguing about this hike is that part of Lapland and a good chunk of this hike is within the Arctic Circle. What is the Arctic Circle? Before I looked this up, I didn't know. So this is interesting to me, and I hope you'll find it interesting. So the Arctic Circle is the southernmost latitude where on the winter solstice, the sun doesn't rise, and in the summer solstice, the sun doesn't set. So it's basically the line that marks where you can have no light in the winter and no dark in the summer. And those are called the polar night in the winter and the midnight sun in the summer. Interestingly, it's not a fixed latitude. It's something that changes over time. It's currently at about 66 degrees and change latitude. But over about a 41,000 year period, it can change depending on the Earth's tilt on its axis. And it can change by up to 2 degrees of latitude, so quite a bit. I understand that the change is due to the tidal forces from the moon's orbit. Don't ask me how that works. I have no idea. Maybe some of you will know. Currently, the Arctic Circle line is drifting northwards at about 14.5 meters a year, so about 48 feet a year. Within the Arctic Circle in Sweden, the largest settlement, the largest town or city is Kiruna, and there are over 22,000 people in Kiruna. But it's far from the largest community in the world north of the Arctic Circle. Murmansk, Russia, has almost 300,000 people, and that is the largest community in the world north of the Arctic Circle. About half of the Kungsleden is within the Arctic Circle. One interesting fact, when I think of the Arctic, I think of polar bears, but there are no polar bears in Swedish Lapland. But there are reindeer, lots of reindeer. Reindeer are a type of northern deer. As Bob points out in our conversation, caribou and reindeer are actually the same species of animal, though some suggest that they should be separated into various species. But there are, I think, something like 6 different subspecies of reindeer, some of which are the caribou, which live in North America, and some are the reindeer, which live in Europe. The word reindeer is from Old Norse, while the word caribou is a French interpretation of a native Mi'kmaq word that means snow shoveler, and that's relating to their habit of pawing at the snow to get to food in the winter. One of the things that's interesting about reindeer that is unique is that the females can have antlers, though the prevalence of females having antlers for reindeer depends on the subspecies. The caribou in North America are wild and travel in large herds. As you may know, if you've seen some of the television shows that cover caribou migrations. But in Sweden, they're semi-domesticated and are herded. So that brings us to the human history of the area. Swedish Lapland has been populated for around 9,000 years. So let's talk about the Sami people, the indigenous people of Lapland. They are from Norway, Sweden, Finland, and parts of Russia, so not just in Swedish Lapland. The Sami language is a Uralic language, which is related to Finnish, Estonian, and Hungarian. And they believe the Samis have roots in the Volga region and moved northwest a few thousand years ago, so maybe they weren't the original inhabitants of Lapland. It appears to have been inhabited even before the Samis, but the Samis have been there for quite a while. And they are well known as semi-nomadic reindeer herders. Even though that's how a lot of people, I think, including me, think of the Sami, that's only about 10% of the Sami people who are actually reindeer herders. Others are engaged in trades like fishing, fur trapping, and sheep herding. In Sweden, reindeer herding, though, is legally protected only for the Sami peoples. So if you are not of the Sami people, you cannot herd reindeer in Sweden. Traditionally, they worked in what are called sida or sida, and these are multifamily groups. And they create seasonal reindeer herding villages around these groups that are engaged in herding particular reindeer. The reindeer are primarily raised for meat. In the Middle Ages, more Swedes started to push into the region, but up until a couple hundred years ago, the Scandinavians pretty much ignored the Sami. But at that point, there were two things that began, and that was both Christianization and forced assimilation. So one of the things that occurred was called Swedification, where they essentially tried to make the Sami people more Swedish. And there was also a push for Christianization, which resulted in the Sami people adopting Lutheranism. Before this, they had been polytheistic, with an emphasis on personal connection in daily life to spirituality. Also, they incorporated some Norse mythology, which it's believed came to them through trading with Norse people. Industrialization reached the Lapland region in the late 19th century, which meant mineral extraction, timber harvesting, and the creation of hydroelectricity eventually. And those things are still really the backbone of the economy of Lapland. A lot of the area where the Kungsleden is protected space. There's the Vindelfjällen Nature Reserve, which is the largest nature reserve in Sweden, and it's one of the largest in Europe. It's more than 500,000 hectares. It has forests, but also tundra and large wetlands. The Arctic fox lives in the mountains of that nature reserve. There's also the Laponia World Heritage Site. There's also 4 national parks in Lapland. And there's the headwaters of the major 4 national rivers of Sweden that come from Lapland. The idea for the Kungsleden itself began in the late 19th century. The Swedish Tourism Association was formed in 1885 and started forming an idea for a royal road through the mountains. The railway was developed in 1902 and made access to the area possible. And the Tourism Association then bought a cabin at Abisko and gradually turned it into a tourist station, which started creating the infrastructure to allow something like this to exist. In 1907, they built chalets. And then in 1926, they started marking the trail. In 1928, it was the first time the trail was called the Kungsleden. Over time, the trail was extended, and it reached its current full length in 1975. All right, with that background, let's jump into my conversation with Bob Delaney about his hike along the Kungsleden. Bob Delaney, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thanks.
So, Bob, you have a YouTube channel that's focused on outdoor activities. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. I just started it for backpacking and hiking. It's family friendly. I want people to put their tiger cubs down in front of my channel, and they don't have to worry about the language, about any topic. It's all friendly. It just started kind of as a whim one time. I thought, people are creating these YouTube videos. Why don't I try this? And then I realized that through camping and hiking and stuff, I've got some decades of experience to share, and it was fun to do. And Mondays, I put out Monday mistakes. These are mistakes I've made. And Wednesdays, I do Wednesday wins, tricks and hacks kind of stuff. And Fridays, I try to put out trip reports and just show how beautiful stuff is out there, maybe how to get to the trail, how to navigate. It's a lot of a how-to. So for a beginner to kind of watch this and say, oh, isn't McAfee not beautiful? And you just park here and you go across the road to the trail and it's easy to find, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's great. That's a cool way to break it up where you've got those different kind of segments that cover different topics that give people a kind of well-rounded information on backpacking. One of the things that I thought was interesting is the name of the channel. It's John's Dad Hikes. Tell me about that.
Well, my son is 26 now, or almost 27. And since he was born, I've been his father, which sounds obvious, but I was 40 when he was born. So I changed from a single professional yuppie kind of person to John's dad. That's who I became. And in Scouts, the kids wouldn't always know the parent's name, but they would know that I was John's dad and Joseph's dad was that guy over there.
Right.
And so I decided, that's who I am. It's not just a handle or a nickname. It describes who I am.
That's pretty cool.
What you don't know is that my son has a trail name.
Uh-huh.
It was given to him by accident, exactly like trail names should be given.
Yeah.
A friend of mine who's known me as John's dad, maybe not 10 years, but pretty close. My son went on us. It was actually to McAfee Knob, that area, the Triple Crown of Virginia on the AT. And she introduced him as John's dad's son.
Nice. That's
and
perfect.
Everybody paused for about 5 seconds because that didn't sound right. But it was right. So his trail name, John's dad's son.
That's perfect. I love that. So it sounds like then you've been doing backpacking and hiking for quite a while. If you've been doing it with your son when he was younger.
I started when I was in Scouts, and that was back probably 74, 75 is when I got out of Scouts. We hiked the length of Isle Royale National Park. That was our capstone project.
Cool.
It was so cool. So I got out of the backpacking stuff then and did car camping and stuff through college. And I introduced him to Cub Scouts when he was little. That's almost 20 years ago now. That's a long time. And he liked the camping and all the activities and everything. And so then he went over to Boy Scouts, and that's when backpacking kicked up again. And so it was just a blast. When we had a big troop, there's I think 80 or something registered Scouts. So there's 40, 50 that were active. And, we had multiple cars on trips and a trailer. I would go with the older Scouts, and the younger Scouts would go a shorter distance and easier trails. And we'd all meet up for lunch and camp together. Then when he got older, then I went with the younger Scouts. And I could use all of my dad jokes over again. It's a whole new audience. It's been like 15 years of just having fun.
That's great. So today we're here to talk about the Kungsleden in Sweden. So that's a trail that not a lot of people know about, I think. I learned about it. My family and I went to Sweden in 2016, and we were there for a few weeks, and I learned about it while I was there. We were nowhere near where the Kungsleden was, but I learned about it while I was there, and I thought, wow, this is cool that this trail is here. How did you learn about this trail, and how did you end up deciding to do it?
I don't remember how I learned about it, not the exact time.
Yeah.
But I was an exchange student to Sweden back in the 70s.
Ah, cool. Okay.
So I have a connection to Sweden, and I have 2 families I lived with and friends now that have moved. And, so when I go to Sweden, I go visit everybody. And so I decided to I joined some Facebook groups for Swedish backpackers. And I speak Swedish, so me and 10 million other people in the world. So it's not that big of a deal, but I joined some Swedish speaking Facebook groups so I could pick up the terminology. What do they call a trail and a backpack and whatever? And so I started seeing pictures of this really beautiful mountain called Skerfe. And I thought, oh, that's really beautiful. And I'd see it and I'd start recognizing, oh, that's the view from Skerfe because it overlooks a river delta. It's just beautiful. And then one time I connected, that's on the King's Trail. And it actually isn't. It's actually about 3 miles west of the King's Trail. So it's a side trip everybody takes.
Okay.
And so that was it. And I decided when I connected those 2 things that I got to hike the King's Trail, which it was real interesting how you pronounced it. And it's a perfectly good American pronunciation.
Oh, it's probably terrible.
In Swedish, learning your Swedish for me, it might be a mistake, but it'd be Kung rather than Kung. So Kungsleden.
Okay. Kungsleden.
Kung is king, Led is trail, and En makes it definitive. So it's the King's Trail.
Got it. Okay.
It translates literally perfectly.
Okay.
So good luck pronouncing it. It's actually tough. So don't beat yourself up.
All right. So then, okay, did you hike the whole thing?
I did. I started at the southern terminus in Hemavan, and it's about, let's say 300 miles up to Abisko. And it isn't this way, but you could draw a ruler, put a ruler on a map, and basically go straight north and south. Now, it does go left and right, and there's curves and up and down for sure. But it's about 300 miles, and you just hike, and you get up in the morning and hike. And because of a thing they call allemansrätten, which is every man's right, if you're in nature, you can hike and camp, have a fire, with a proper fishing license, you can fish anywhere, and nobody can stop you. You can say, I'm hiking along and I've gone, the next cabin might be 2 miles away, but you know what? Here's a perfect spot right here. You can set up your camp, and it's every man's right. You can camp wherever you want. You don't have to follow the trail. You can say, you know what? I want to go over to that peak and I want to go up and over that. I've got my map. You can just go off, just do what you want.
That's great. So a bunch of questions come to mind, and I guess we'll get to some of them. But one that you mentioned, you went south to north. Why go south to north? It seems like the prevailing way to go is typically the other direction, but maybe that's just because of the transportation setup.
I've looked into that a little bit because I was kind of curious. What I found that seemed to sink home with me the best was that Kungsleden started in Abisko.
Uh-huh.
The guys the professors in Uppsala that were thinking about this back in the 1800s started it in Abisko and worked south.
Okay.
So it literally starts in Abisko. It wasn't until I forget I think it was in the 70s that it actually connected up to the whole way, the current version of Kungsleden.
Okay.
In the 40s, it actually got called Kungsleden for the first time when they connected the trail down to a village called Kvikkjokk. So it actually wasn't called the King's Trail from the beginning. I wanted to go south to north. My initial plan was that I was going to carry a solar charger in my backpack, hike north, and have the sun on my back. But the reality, because you're so close to the North Pole, the sun comes up at, let's say on a compass, about 10 degrees and doesn't go very high. And all day long, it goes around behind you and it sets about 350 degrees.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the sun really isn't behind you. That was what I started planning. And so then I was kind of hooked into that's the direction I'm going. The one thing I found, I agree, I still think that's the right way to go. The sun does tend to be in your eyes, low near the horizon, in the mornings and in the late afternoons. So then you can't see the beauty.
If you're going
south. Right.
So it's better to go north to keep it away from the face. Yeah.
And the pictures are better. All the shadows are going away from you.
Okay.
That's an argument for doing it south to north. And I think it's evening out a little bit, but it's still predominantly north to south. The train ride to Abisko, you could do an overnight train from Stockholm. You get off and, it's not a quarter mile and you're on Kungsleden. So it was very easy.
Oh, okay, great.
To get to the northern terminus. The southern terminus, there's a couple ways to get there. There's even an airport there. You can actually fly, walk about a mile or so, and now you're on the southern terminus. So either end, if you go one way or the other, you offset the inefficiency. So you're going to do the bus ride either at the start or at the end. So it doesn't actually matter.
Okay. So what did you do to go about planning this? Are there good resources in Swedish that you used, or were there good resources in English, or both?
A little of each. Of course, it was my plan was to do it in 2020, and so that didn't happen.
Yeah.
With COVID coming, and I also had my right knee replaced on August 1st of 2020, I'll tie that in a second here. So I really couldn't go. So I had a plan to do it. It was scheduled. So I had a year to actually over plan. So I watched every available YouTube. I bought books in English for planning it, books in Swedish for planning it. I watched all the videos in English or Swedish, and you get subtitles. I even watched the ones in German or Dutch. I got some maps. I was over was it a funeral? Yeah, I forget. We were over for some reason, and so I picked up all the maps I needed. And I literally sat down at my planning table and I went foot by foot the whole way, making notes on the map for where the water crossings were and the phone numbers or the emails to get to contact the people. I measured distances between water. Mm-hmm. So you don't need to carry water there.
I was going to say, I would imagine there's plenty of water.
There's water everywhere, but there did appear, now I know this now, but it did appear that there would be times where I might need to carry 1 or 2 liters of water. Mm-hmm. That would never a 7-liter carry. I mean, absolutely not.
Right.
And it really turned out you just need a cup. You don't need to carry any water. It's actually kind of if there's a negative to the whole King's Trail is that there's too much water.
Yeah,
it is everywhere.
It's a little sloppy.
Yeah.
Huh?
So I did that. I planned out my before and after. So I figured out that I wanted to do my own resupply. You can mail yourself resupply boxes, very traditional like you do on the PCT or on the AT. And it's a little bit more difficult because not everybody accepts packages from everywhere. So I went with my host brother, Carl, and he helped me get my boxes shipped. It was shipping. I actually used the word shipping rather than mailed.
Okay.
So we actually had to go to a freight company.
Oh, wow.
And fill out all the freight forms with tears and the categories of the product in the box, stuff you would do for shipping.
Wow.
And the mailing was easy. There was one box I mailed, you dropped it off, and boom, done. But this was fill out a form and all of this. It was a pain. Luckily, he speaks Swedish, and I have a career in shipping and logistics. So between the two of us, we actually knew how to fill out the forms.
Okay. Wait, so did you hike with Carl on this entire trip?
I didn't hike with Carl at all. He was from my first host family in the very south of Sweden.
I see.
And so I flew into Copenhagen, took the train across, stayed with him for a bit, and he helped kick me off. Then I went up to Gothenburg, which is their second largest city. And that's where my other family was. And my nephew, who wasn't even born when I lived there, he did hike with me for a week.
Okay.
Young kid, like around 40, and great shape. When we got done, he went home after a week. He's still working. He took a couple buses and a couple trains and went home. The week after that, he went and ran a marathon. So he's in a different...
Well, get you into shape.
Oh, yeah. He was in different shape than I was. So it was fun spending time with him because I'd known him just kind of tangentially as he grew up. And so now we just spent a week together, literally shoulder to shoulder most times.
But the rest of it, you hiked alone?
There was no one planned to hike with me, no.
But you meet people out while you're out
right.
there. Yeah.
So at Kvikkjokk, so I'd hiked almost maybe 4 days alone. I met a guy named Bao from Vietnam. He's working in Denmark. In there someplace, I also met, I was at a brook crossing. I met a woman from Germany named Caroline. I happened to sit next to her on the boat as we're going across. And I'm fairly social, and I want to speak Swedish. So I start speaking to her in Swedish, and we ended up in English. She doesn't speak a lot of it. But then she and I leapfrogged a little bit, and then up in Kvikkjokk, I met Bao, and then she happened to be there. She had gotten sick and left the trail and came back. She hiked twice as fast as I did. So then it wasn't planned. It just happened. We kind of had the same cycle every day and ended up finishing together a couple weeks later.
Nice.
Bao lives over in Denmark. So last time I was over, I went over and visited him. And then right now he's working on his visa to come over and hike part of the AT with me this summer.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, he's a great kid. And he's also young. He's a young kid, probably early 30s. So.
Everybody's a young kid to you.
Well, that's all relative, yeah.
But that's great. It's really cool to meet people when you're out on these long trails and make those friendships. It really makes the experience wonderful. And people always seem to worry about doing these trails alone. And that's what I would tell anyone is you're never going to be alone on a big trail like this. You're going to meet people.
Yep. Yeah, and that's if you start with the bubble on the AT or on the PCT, I mean, you get like too many people.
Yeah.
And you really in Kungsleden, you don't have that. At the busy stretches, which were at the further north sections, you could look and you could see 4 or 5 other hikers maybe. This is wide open. You're looking 10, 15 miles of open nature. In the southern end, you could run into a couple people every day. But at the northern end, you weren't alone. If you fell down, somebody would come along within a day, if not a few hours.
Uh-huh.
So you're not totally alone at all. And they're all friendly. So.
Well, you mentioned that you thought the sun might be behind you to help you charge your equipment with a solar charger, but then realized it was pretty low in the sky. And this trail finishes in the north. You said almost near the North Pole, but that's not an exaggeration.
That's an exaggeration.
Well, it's not that much, though. I mean, it does go above the Arctic Circle at the very end.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So could you describe a little bit what this area looks like? Because I think when people think of a vast wilderness in Europe, they may not be thinking of northern Lapland.
Oh, true. Well, you get up in the morning, you're in your tent and you wake up and the sun has been up for about 5 hours. So you get out of your tent, and if it was below freezing, you got some frost on your tent. If not, you have really long shadows because the sun is so low on the horizon that mountain behind you is casting a shadow 2/3 of the way across the valley you're in. a river running through the middle of the valley, and sometimes with really cool like rapids, and other times it's kind of benign, just water kind of just slowly flowing. You see the glaciers and the mountains of piles of snow, and they're all white. They're just from the sun shining on them. And the valley's probably a minimum of 3 miles wide, and it was scooped out by a glacier coming through. So it's just like a perfect U shape, just pushed right through. And they're intersecting valleys. You can see forever. And the trail, you get up and start going, and the trail is can be dirt, can be a few rocks, it can be lots of rocks, big rocks. There weren't a lot of like Pennsylvania does not come to mind.
Okay.
When I hiked the Appalachian Trail in Pennsylvania, there were times it's like, where'd they find all of these stupid rocks? And that just didn't happen on Kungsleden. You'd have places where there's lots and lots of rocks, maybe the size of a bowling ball,
Mm-hmm.
and all of them were rounded. None of them were sharp from erosion.
Okay.
So on different trails, you get really sharp, pointy rocks. These are all smooth. You just have to pick your way through them. So you're up above tree line usually, but then if you're coming to a water crossing, now you got to come down. And sometimes those are fairly steep, and there's always water running down the trail. Then you get into the pine and birch forest. And then boom, suddenly the trail leads you right to the dock where you get picked up for a rented boat ride. Well, you can pay for a ride across most of the water. Or there's also some rowboats there.
You can take yourself across.
On most of them, there's 7 required water crossings that don't have a bridge, right? And there's a lot that you kind of step on rocks to get across, but there are 7 serious water crossings. One of them, just north of Yakvik, you have to use a rowboat. There is no other way. And you get in the rowboat. And in 1974, I earned my rowing merit badge. And that was the last time I was in a rowboat. But I got across, got in it, got across, landed right where I was supposed to, because you have to crab into the current. I just hit it just right. Never got my boots wet.
Nice.
I was really impressed with myself. Some German guys helped me get in the rowboat.
You didn't cheat on that merit badge.
No.
You actually
I earned it. Yeah. And then there's others where there's a boat schedule. So like once in the morning, once in the afternoon, a boat will come across and pick up the hikers that are ready to go.
Okay.
And sometimes you have to, there's a flag, one place you have to raise a flag, and they've got binoculars that they look to see if somebody raised the flag. And I had my Garmin inReach with me, and I just texted them and said, hey, I'm going to be at the boat ramp for your 2:00 boat ride. So that way they actually come across. We don't want them to think nobody's there. One of the boat crossings with rowboats is 6 miles.
Wow.
Yeah. And I saw people doing that. The boat that I waited like 3 hours for, I sat there and just relaxed, waited for the scheduled boat, and we passed people rowing 6 miles.
Oh, wow.
And it's not for me. I'm too old for that. I've got a credit card. I'm okay. The thing with the rowboats, the first one it's a quarter mile probably at most. So it's no big deal. But one of the rules, and it's actually kind of a written rule, I don't know how they'd ever enforce it, but it's a written rule that you always have to have at least one rowboat on each side.
Yeah.
So if you come to the shore and there's one boat there, you have to row across, and it could be 6 miles, right?
Yeah.
Tie up one of those boats and bring it back, tie it up back on the original shore, and then go.
Oh, man.
And I saw a guy doing that at one crossing. It was probably, for sure, a good mile across the water. And he did that. And when he came back, he said, I'm done. He was clearly exhausted.
Yeah.
He was a young guy too, but probably 45, 50. And he looked like he was in good shape. I mean, he had good reason to believe that he could take on a physical challenge and be successful and happy at it. And he was done.
Yeah. Wow. So all the water leads me to my next question, which is, how are the mosquitoes?
Well, the hiking season for Kungsleden, it goes from the middle of June to the middle of September. That's their summer, and it actually pushes summer a little bit. Early in the year, there's lots of water melting. So all the water levels are high, and the mosquitoes are horrible. Once you hit that first frost, now the mosquitoes aren't so bad. And I went in August. So it turns out I started 1 year today after my knee operation on August 1st of 21. I did have one day that there were mosquitoes that kind of bugged me. I had the head net thing. I used that one time. I sprayed all of my clothes with permethrin.
Yeah.
And so it was cold enough. A high temperature of 70 degrees, you say, oh, this is a heat wave. So 60 degrees, 65, 55, it's real common. So it was always okay to have your shell on. And I put up the hood, and that just created like a cone of permethrin around me. And the mosquitoes really didn't bother me. They also have some kind of gnats or no-see-ums. And now my friend Caroline, one time she got in her tent, she had left the door open. And the tent is filled up with these no-see-um things. And I had left my door kind of unzipped, but not open like she had. And I thought, uh-oh. And I got in, and there were the bodies of these dead gnats all over the bottom of my tent. But I had sprayed it and the screen and everything with permethrin.
Okay.
So that's my secret is, fill it up with permethrin, kill these things. You don't need them.
Yep.
But they are merciless. You see a lot of people in videos and people talking, as you meet them about how bad they are. They're just incessant. You have to, if you don't want to eat, you lift your head net, stick a bite in and bring it down quick. And you still let in some mosquitoes.
Yeah. So it's probably better that August is probably a really good time to go compared to June if you want to avoid the heavy mosquitoes.
For my opinion, I would even push it a little bit later. I mean, when I do it next time, I'm planning to do the exact same dates so that I can compare. Start August 1st here and where was I August 2nd and that kind of thing. But I would actually be okay pushing it a week or so later. You can't go too close to the middle of September because it shuts down.
Sure.
The cabins close, the buses shut down, the train lines stop running. The summer is over for the northern Sweden. So the later is better. You get fewer mosquitoes, the water levels are lower, but you don't have to worry about the water levels being low. That's not an issue.
How long did it take you to do this?
I started August 1st and I hit Abisko on the 24th of August, so 24 days. But I took a zero in Yakvik, which hindsight I probably shouldn't have. It was a beautiful sunny day. I should have hiked because the next day, of course, it was pouring rain. And I took 2 days in Kvikjok and 2 days in Saltelukta. And one day maybe would have been enough, or just a shower and sleep in a bed one night could have actually been enough. So it's 21 days, maybe a little bit more. It just depends.
Okay. And that's a pretty big mileage amount per day. And I guess that's because this is not really steep, hugely mountainous terrain. Is this more rolling hills with sort of gentle valleys?
It really is. I mean, there's a couple places where you're out of breath and breathing heavy, but it lasts a quarter mile. It isn't like the roller coaster on the Appalachian Trail where 2 days later, you're still doing these steep ups and downs. For the most part, if there is an up and down, it's a gradual, or then you're going to go down to the water or come up out of the water, from the water. Of course, that's going to be fairly steep, but it's over in less than a mile.
Okay.
You get up on top and you're out of the valley again. And, it's not flat. The lowest elevation on the Kungsleden is at Kvikjok at about 1,000 feet above sea level. The highest on Kungsleden is at Chakcha Pass up near Abisko, kind of up that way. And I was, maybe 3,000 feet, maybe 3,200. So the whole height or the range of Kungsleden is only 2,000 feet.
Okay.
Maybe 2,500, something like that. But that's stuff you can do in a day on other trails.
Right.
You do go up and down, right? It isn't a flat trail that goes up only 2,000 feet over 300 miles. That's not what's happening. But it really wasn't bad. Somebody with a little bit of a backpacking experience wouldn't have trouble. It's not a challenging that way.
You mentioned around 300 miles, and I've got it at about 440 or 450 kilometers and about 275 in miles. Is that about right? Okay.
Yeah, but then you might do a detour here and there. And so when my pedometer actually had me at 300 miles, which I don't necessarily trust it as being accurate, but it was like 300 point something miles was what it said I hiked.
Okay. And you mentioned, for example, that there was a day that had a lot of rain. What's the rain situation like throughout this trail? Is it pretty common in this time of year?
Well, if you think 50% of the days is common, yeah.
Okay, that's pretty common.
There's a difference between the weather, which is what's happening right now, and the climate. And the climate says it's going to rain on half the days. And so on my 25 days or so, it only rained 10 days.
Okay.
And some days it wasn't bad. It was like oh yeah, it's kind of misty and you want to have your shell on, and but there was only a few days where it was, I wish I was home.
Yeah, yeah.
In fact, there was a day, it was hilarious. Hiking into the wind, I was going to Salta-Lucta, which is one of the mountain stations. Actually very flat, through a nice little pretty valley with a little river on the side. It was really beautiful, except it was pouring rain with wind straight out of the north, right in my face. So I was hiking with my head down, with my poles, just boom, boom, splash, splash, splash. And off to the right, I see two boots standing at the trail. Somebody coming southbound saw me coming with my head down, stepped off the trail just in time so I didn't run head on into them.
Yeah.
But they could hike with their head up. They could see where they were going.
Yeah.
And so from then on, I didn't even worry about it. They're going to see me. And one other time, I saw some people's boots off to the side and, hello, and kept going.
So what do you need gear-wise? Anything special, or is this pretty much standard backpacking gear does the trick?
It really is. And you got to think about it's really normal stuff. It's going to go below freezing. So I always take whatever I expect it to be and add and subtract 10 degrees.
Yeah.
So I planned it's going to be 20 degrees. It's going to rain half the days. If somebody said you want to go someplace for a month where it's going to rain on you every other day, okay, maybe it isn't a big draw, but it was so beautiful. It's okay.
Yeah.
But the rest of it, I've made some changes where I've reduced my tent weight. I got a Durston Dyneema tent, which cut 2 pounds out.
Nice.
I got a quilt instead of my down mummy bag, which cut almost 2 pounds out. So there's things like that. I bought some hiking. I actually bought some hiking poles, but now I got the Durston tent, so I can't use my really, really lightweight hiking poles.
Yeah, yeah.
And the Durston uses tent poles to get set up.
Sure. Yep.
Other than that, the normal stuff. The thing that I did not take and I regretted was rain pants.
Yeah.
I didn't want to carry them. They weigh about a pound, I think. So I can cut that pound out. I've never really needed them before. So I didn't take them. And even though it wouldn't rain every other day, it wasn't methodical like that. You'd have beautiful weather for a week, and then a week of kind of cloudy, misty, rainy kind of stuff, and then some more sun. So what would happen is that the rain would come and get on all the bushes that were about waist height.
Right.
And not enough people go through that. The trail is always 5 feet wide. It's about a half a foot wide. And all those bushes put their water into my pants, and they wicked up under my shell. So I was actually sopping wet up to my chest.
Yeah, yeah.
When I got to Salta-Lucta, one of my friends from Belgium, Annelies, she was one day ahead of us, so we kept catching up to her. She said, why don't you just buy some rain pants here? And I went and I got it. I tried it on. I bought them. And guess how much they cost? This is a mountain station in the middle of nowhere.
I don't even want to know. $250.
$350.
Oh my God.
But I was to the point where I was going to have to decide, can I continue or not?
Yeah, yeah.
So I got the credit card, and now I have some really nice Fjällräven rain pants that should last me the rest of my life, according to their website.
Yeah, Fjällräven rain pants aren't that much cheaper when you buy them here.
So, but it worked out really. It saved my trip. It was getting to a safety hypothermia kind of thing.
Yeah,
I wasn't having that problem, but it was, if I'm wet, I get any kind of injury or any kind of delay, I got a problem. So I just took the brave or the weak way or whatever it is. I spent the money.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm here. I got to do this.
Right. You swallowed the bitter pill.
That's right. That's right. Yep.
So speaking of safety, how did you navigate on this trail? Is it pretty simple? Is it well marked?
It really is. It runs through 2 counties. They would call them, they wouldn't call them counties, but it runs through 2 counties. And in one county, the blazes are just splashes of orange paint, and the other one splashes of red. Lars pointed it out to me when it changed. If he hadn't pointed it out, I don't know if I would have noticed. They just follow in the blazes.
Yeah.
And what they do for the summer trail, they actually dig a hole and they'll put a couple of vertical rocks in, like flat shale kind of rocks, and paint the top on both sides with red or orange blaze.
Okay.
So the trail goes right between these 2 rocks. That's where people go. And the winter trail, which is a little bit different because it goes over frozen water. So you can ski it or hike it. A lot of people do the skiing or the hiking, and they drag a I don't know what the word in English is, a polka, a trailer, or a
Yeah,
sled.
it's like a sled almost.
Yeah, yeah. And so they'll load that up with 100 pounds worth of food and gear because at those temperatures and those winds and that weather, you need to take stuff. So they'll follow the winter trail, which is on poles that are probably at least 20 feet tall, and they have big red X's on them. At least when they were installed, they were red, and over years they've faded.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can actually see these then forever. You can actually look down a valley and watch the winter trails because they're so close to each other. They're designed for bad weather, both the winter and the summer.
Yes, you can see them.
The theory on blaze is that you can stand at one and see the next.
Yeah.
I got a little off trail one time because it wasn't true, but you can see the blaze you're at and 2 or 3 more. That's how often they are.
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard to get lost on purpose. I mean, you'd have to try. You'd have to stop thinking and kind of wander off. It was not hard. I did take my paper maps. I'd take notes on the map. That's where I had the phone numbers written in the emails for the water crossings. I had marked on there where I thought I might need to carry extra water, which didn't really need to do that. So
better to be over prepared, I guess. Speaking of following the trail, you mentioned that wild camping is allowed, but you also mentioned the mountain stations. And my understanding is there's also a hut system. Mm-hmm. So it seems like you've got these 3 options, or at different times there's different options. How did you manage that? And what did you do? And what do you recommend other people do for where they camp or where they have accommodations?
There's a stretch of Kungsleden between Ammernes and Kvikkjokk where you're on your own. There are no mountain stations or cabins. Let's say every 10 miles, not exact, but 10 miles for planning, there's a cabin. It's going to be like maybe the huts you'd see in the White Mountains.
Okay.
Except they do not have electricity. They do have propane stoves and they have bunk beds. So very similar to that. They have a host that lives there. They stay there, come and stay for a month or for the summer. It does cost about $50 to stay inside. You can camp for about $4 or $5 nearby outside in your tent, and you get to come in and use the little lunchroom area and their propane stoves. Or if you're outside of their area, you can set up your tent. If you can find a place to set up the tent, you can set it up. There's a couple places that are like bird sanctuaries, and there's big signs saying you can't leave the trail between here and here because of this species of geese that there's only 100 breeding pairs left. And so, but for the most part, you can set up your tent anywhere, literally anywhere. There's, 17 or so of those cabins. They also have along Kungsleden, they have them all through northern Sweden and southern Sweden too, mountain stations. So that's different than a cabin. And the station has electricity, has heated showers, has the same bunk beds, has a real slow Wi-Fi, and has a restaurant. And oh man, the food in the restaurant. Maybe it's eating Mountain House for a week in a row.
Yeah.
But the food in the restaurant was really good. They had, grilled char with like garlic mashed potatoes, and I had a raspberry dessert thing, a parfait kind of a thing. Oh, it was so good. So they have not a gift store, a resupply store in the mountain stations, and every other cabin has a store as well.
When you're shipping your resupplies, are you shipping them to the cabins and the mountain stations, or are you shipping them to towns?
To either someplace in a town, which in these towns are not very big, mm-hmm. or to a station. The cabins are out literally in the middle of nowhere. They built it with helicopters, no electricity, no roads. You just come across this place and they found a flat spot to build this cool little complex of 1, 2, 3, 4 bunk buildings. They always pick the place with a great view too. It's just awesome. The mountain stations actually have a road to go in front of them.
Okay.
Or have one of them, the road goes on the other side of the river. But there's a boat that goes back and forth, so they're resupplied fairly easily.
I saw somewhere that there were saunas. Tell me about that. Are there actually saunas you can use along this trail?
Oh, absolutely. Now, I went during COVID.
Yeah.
My little window in 2021, I was watching both the Swedish and the American websites for when does the United States allow us to go and come back, and when does Sweden allow people from the United States to go and come back, and what are the rules? They relaxed the rules. I bought my tickets within about 2 days. Because of the COVID stuff, they had all kinds of rules that who knows if they helped. We may never know. But the saunas were all shut down.
Okay.
So One of the guys, a German guy I know now, I met him on the trail from, he lives in Austria, but he's German. He just sent me a message, a couple months ago that he had gone and he did another section because he was there, had no tent, just had bedding and his hiking clothes. And so he had a reservation in every other hut.
Okay.
So then he could stop, get food, sleep there inside, and then get to the next hut. So he went back and redid that. And he said the saunas were the best part.
Well, that gives you a reason to go back.
Yep. Now, the saunas, when I was younger, I was less inhibited maybe. The saunas there are not with your bathing suit on.
Right. I understand. Yeah. And I in Sweden, I mean, that's a part of the culture. It's a deep part of the culture,
Yep.
the whole sauna culture.
Yep.
And not even so when we went to Sweden, we used to do home exchanges.
Okay.
Where the family from Sweden came and stayed in our home here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And we went to there and we let them use our car here and we used their car and drove all over Sweden. And they had a sauna in their home,
Sure.
which was fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's pretty normal in pretty much every home that has a reasonable means.
Yes, I think that's true. A lot of them, especially probably the more newer built homes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Or they've got them, if it's an apartment complex, they've got a communal one for the whole apartment building.
Exactly.
Yep. Oh, yeah. You sit in the sauna for maybe 20 minutes, half hour, and you run out. And if it's wintertime, they can cut a hole in the ice. And I've done this. You crawl down into the hole.
Yeah.
And it takes about 30 seconds before you say, oh, this is cold. And then you're scampering back inside to sit inside the sauna again.
So other than reserving the cabins, do you need any permits to do this trail?
You don't have to reserve the cabins.
Oh, you don't?
You don't.
Okay. But you said you had mentioned that somebody you met did do
That's
that.
right. You can do it.
I see. Okay.
And with outside of COVID rules, they had different rules. They basically say, if you show up, we'll let you sleep inside. You got to pay the money. We'll let you sleep inside. The reservation gets you the bunk.
I see.
If you don't have a reservation and they're all full, now you got a mattress in the kitchen
Okay.
or in the dining room. But you don't have to reserve it.
Yeah.
During the peak seasons, especially the mountain stations, which are used not just for hiking King's Trail, but for any kind of stuff going on in the mountains, they're real popular. You do want the reservation, but it's not required.
And do you pay in cash when you get there, or do they take credit, or how does that work?
They will tell you that you have to be prepared to pay in cash at the cabins.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, no electricity or anything, but they got big, huge solar panels on the south wall facing south. So they do have credit cards. So I was able to pay with a credit card every place except for one boat crossing. I paid in cash. And near the end, I could have paid more with credit card, but I had all the cash reserves. And so I started paying in cash just to get rid of the money.
Okay.
Credit card or a debit card, it's not 100%, but you could get by with just a credit card.
Okay. So that's probably something that's changed over time as solar has become more common and Wi-Fi with solar has become more common.
Oh, right. Yep.
So how do you think about this in terms of an itinerary for planning? Are there distinct sections of the trail? And if so, are they different from each other? Or is this pretty similar throughout the trail? How does this work?
You could actually go with the same thought process for planning if you went from the south or the north.
Okay.
Because the cabins are 10 miles apart approximately. And every other one has a store. So you could just attack it either way, just plan on every other day I can buy food.
Okay.
And, if you're doing 20 miles, of course, it's every day. And I met a couple that was running the trail that they actually had done that. All they had, I was a couple from Stockholm, and all they had was their running clothes. And they had a reservation every other night, and they had to go 20 miles.
Yeah. Yeah.
If they didn't go 20 miles, they had nothing to sleep in, nothing to wear, no food. But you just plan it out that way. The northern week, the terrain is a little different. The valleys are wider. The peaks are a little taller. Some people think it's more beautiful, but I kind of like the southern end too, for a lot more greenery and a lot of reindeer. Saw probably a couple thousand reindeer out there.
Are the reindeer herded or are they wild?
They're not wild because somebody comes out in the spring or in the let's say I'm not a reindeer herder here, but I think in the fall they kind of gather them.
I see.
So they're safe through the winter, but then they let them go and they have their calves and stuff. Like in May is when they have their calves, And that's one reason the hiking season doesn't start until mid-June. You want to keep people out of the mountains so that the reindeer are not bothered.
Okay.
But then they just wander wherever they want. A couple places there were some fences. You could kind of tell that that's where they herded them to get them on a truck or on a boat or something. But no, they're just walking along. You come around a corner and there'll be a herd of them there, and they're kind of skittish. And so I don't think you'd have to worry about that they wouldn't attack you, because they would just run 20 yards and then you're no longer a danger to them. And so they did that all the time. There was come around the corner, come over a little hill, and they'd be running around talking to each other, having fun, just hanging out. I went backpacking in Alaska with my son last summer. And it turns out caribou in Alaska are genetically the same thing as the reindeer.
Oh, wow.
They're the same animal. And so they acted the same in Alaska too. They had gotten the memo and how to treat hikers coming through their area.
Yeah.
And they were truly wild though in Alaska.
Right. That's right. So you mentioned the northern section's a little different, and I noticed in looking into this trail that a lot of people do that as a section hike. It's Abisko to
Nicolauta.
Nicolauta. Okay. Yeah. And so a lot of people will do that section. It's like 105 kilometers, I believe.
It's about a week. Yep, 60 miles.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely beautiful. You leave Abisko going south, and you follow a gorge with just rushing water, just forcing its way through this gorge that's maybe 40, 50 yards wide at most. The cool thing when I came through, of course, the other way, the rocks at the bottom where the water's lower are rounded on the sides of the walls, but at the top, they're sharp. So you can tell that this thing has been here a long time, and it's eroding the rocks at the bottom, nice and smooth and real sharp at the top. And that also follows along with Dag Hammarskjöld's trail, and he was the head of NATO for a while, and back might have been before my time even. And he's got every so often they've got a meditation place where he has one of his quotes carved into a big rock.
Oh, neat.
And a bench there for you to sit and look at the beauty and think about the most difficult trail is a trail inward, and you think about what that means to you.
Right. Interesting.
And then you get down, as you're going south from Abisko to just do this short section, you get to a place called Singi, which is just it's a cabin in the middle of nowhere, and several trails intersect there, and you can head east from there and go towards Nicolauta. But you also, let's say it's a 2-day trip from Singi, leaving the King's Trail to Nicolauta. Let's say it's 2 days. Halfway through, there's another mountain station for Kebnekaise, which is their highest mountain.
Okay.
And so a lot of people will hike the King's Trail, get to Singi, and then go east to Kebnekaise's mountain station, spend a night, hike to the top of Kebnekaise, which is about 6,000 feet. That's the highest point in all of Sweden. So oxygen is never an issue. You're never going up over 14,000 or 14ers or anything like that.
Yep.
And then they'll come down, spend another night, and then go back and return to the King's Trail. Or you can exit at Nicolauta as well.
That sounds like an interesting side trip. Are there any can't miss side trips in your mind? I think you mentioned one that's only a few miles earlier.
Yeah, there's one place called Skersvik. If you see a picture of it, you'd say, "Oh wow, I want to go up there." It's pretty self-descriptive, and it is about 3-4 miles west of Kungsleden. From where you're crossing, you're probably about 1,000 feet above sea level, and its top is about 3,500. Let's say it's 5 miles. You're climbing basically at a 45-degree angle, almost all the way up. That's exaggerating.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there's water along the way and little mud pits. And one of our best campsites was from Axe, which is down at the water crossing. Went up a couple miles, and Bao found us a beautiful little prairie area to look back down over the water we just crossed.
Nice. It
was just awesome. Then in the morning, we got up and we left the King's Trail going west to climb up Skersvik.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I say climb, it's just a steep hiking trail. There's never any ropes or anything involved. So we climbed up this. The group I was with at the time, they set up a tent and put their backpacks at the bottom so they could go up empty.
Mm-hmm.
And on the map, there's one trail that goes up. But when you get out there, you find out that no, there's a lot of different trails out here. And I decided I couldn't figure out which trail to take to come back down to make sure I'd find my backpack again.
Yeah.
So I carried my 40-pound backpack all the way to the top of this thing. And it wasn't until I got within 100 yards, it's like, oh, I can find this spot again. And so they actually had trouble finding their tent when they got back down. It wasn't, it wasn't like days of searching, but it wasn't where they thought it was. So I made a good call because my 10 essentials are in my backpack.
Sure.
It's just, I cannot set this thing down and consider myself safe after that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was just beautiful up there.
So as you think about this trail, I think about a lot of people, when they think of Europe, they're thinking of the Alps, right? That's sort of the classic Europe. Why do this trail? Why should somebody put in the effort to go out and hike in northern Sweden and almost to the or within the Arctic Circle eventually,
for sure,
versus doing some of the bigger mountains in Europe? How would you pitch this trail to someone?
On my list is the Tour de Mont Blanc, which my friend Bao has done, and he and I talked about it. I think that the King's Trail would be kind of a beginner trail.
Okay.
I know it's 300 miles, and you're in the remote
beginner long trail.
Yeah. I think that the rate of success has to be very high, except for injury. A new friend of mine from Israel ended up getting off the trail early. He and I met through the King's Trail. He had to get off early because of an injury. Mm-hmm. But other than that, it's a fairly easy trail to follow for sure. You're not going to get hurt. If you do get hurt and you hit your helicopter button and your Garmin emergency beacon, there's lots of places to land helicopters.
Yeah. Okay. So you think it's despite its remoteness, it sounds like it's a fairly safe place to hike.
There was only one day where I felt that I was at risk, and that was because I was stupid.
Okay.
It had nothing to do with the trail. It was me.
What about, to me, it seems like what would be unique about this trail and why it would be worth doing is it's just so different from anywhere else you can really hike in Europe. There's nothing like it seems like.
I can't compare. But if I do, you look at the Alps, and the Camino de Santiago is totally a different experience. I wouldn't say if you do one, you can do the other, or that you'd want to do the other. They're different experiences.
Right. Do you have a particular moment or memory that stands out for you as a time where you kind of felt like, wow, I'm excited to be out here and this is what I'm going to remember about this trip?
When we were climbing up over Chakcha Pass, which is the highest point, and I turned around and looked back, and there were no words, because we had just walked, from what I could see, was about 10 miles, and we had come from around the bend just that day. And you're looking down this valley with the snow and the water rushing through the rapids. And it's further north, so you can actually see a couple hikers down there. Coming up and over that, now I was going northbound, but if you're coming southbound, that'd be like your first spectacular view. And it was pretty awesome.
Is there anything you would do differently if you advise somebody else to do it again? It sounds like rain pants is one thing. Definitely bring rain pants. Other than bringing rain pants and not having to pay $350 to buy them on the trail, is there anything else that you would do differently?
I went through a lot of hassle and planning to prepare my food or my resupply boxes. You put toothpaste in, extra maps and stuff. It doesn't just have to be food. And the food in the huts, every other hut, and in the mountain stations, it's a little more expensive. But what happened is I would eat, went to Ammernes in one little town, and we had burgers and fries. So now I'm carrying an extra meal, and I had just picked up at the grocery store where I'd shipped my resupply box 4 or 5 days worth of food. So I had extra food. I just picked up 4 or 5 days worth of food. So my plan in the future is to carry 1 day worth of emergency food and buy things in the huts or in the mountain stations as I go by. You might end up with a poor selection. One place in Kvikkjokk, when I was there, they had like 30 or 40 freeze-dried meals. They were all the freeze-dried mushroom risotto with cream sauce. Every one of them. So
you better like that.
Other places, it was a grocery store with a huge spread just for the backpackers. All the different varieties and different cheeses. They've got cheese in a tube. It's shelf stable.
Okay.
And I'm originally from Wisconsin. I find a way to get a cheese out to the backcountry. I'm doing it. All kinds of different flavors, bacon flavor and shrimp flavor and everything you'd ever want.
Nice.
So I'm resupplying at the huts next time.
Yeah, I think that's generally good advice for longer hikes that a lot of people who haven't done longer trips don't know is that if you have special dietary needs, you can ship some things to yourself. But in general, most of these hikes are set up so that you can resupply along the
Oh,
way.
yeah. Yep. I planned to camp every night. That was my plan. And with some exceptions, a couple of them, I stayed inside a mountain station or in a hut. My plan next time is to take my lighter tent,
Uh-huh.
but actually plan to stay in the huts. That's where you get the socialization.
Right,
You get
right.
to meet the other people. When I found a place just in the middle of nowhere, I'd set up my tent and it was beautiful. You could see some reindeer maybe and a little breeze and a waterfall or some rapids. But I actually kind of enjoyed talking to those people from Spain. You know, the man was injured, so he was taking all the boat rides and all the shortcuts he could take, but his wife wasn't injured, so they were meeting up and we spent, an hour talking to them. It was great.
Yeah, that's a good point too, is that when there is a hut system, that is a very social place to be and that you're going to meet a lot of
Yeah.
other trekkers that way. I agree with that as well. Well, Bob, thank you for telling me about your hike on the Kungsleden. Did I get it
Yes.
right? Was I even close?
That was perfect.
Okay. All right. But while I have you, I've got a few more questions if you don't mind.
Sure.
All right. So what's the one hike that you've done besides this one that others shouldn't miss out on?
Well, I've been out to Yosemite a couple times, and it went out. It was October. A friend of mine said, "Hey, I'm going to be in San Francisco for a conference or something. Do you want to meet me at Yosemite?" So we got a tent in the valley and did day hikes
Mm-hmm.
out of the valley, and we'd drive and went up to Clouds Rest, and
Yep.
we went up to Tuolumne Meadows, and he took a shorter day, and I just went by myself north on the PCT.
Mm-hmm.
Just hiked as fast as I could until I reached my turnaround time. I'll set a timer if I'm doing it out in the back. When the timer goes off, I don't care. I turn around.
How far did you get?
I got almost up to, is it Glen Allen?
Yeah. Yeah.
I went past Delaney Creek, and that was my goal. My last name being Delaney, so I had to get
Yeah.
past that. And I think it was Glen Allen.
There's a big waterfall at Glen Allen.
Yeah.
But then you kind of go right up through. There's like a meadow past that, I think.
I was just shy about a half a mile from there.
Okay.
I met a lady from the Bay Area on this one bridge, and we sat and talked for about an hour. And she was asking, well, do you have a brother that likes to do this stuff? I'm thinking, hey, what's wrong with me? But she was,
Yeah.
she's a young kid. She was in her 40s, I guess. So but that was just absolutely beautiful. And
Yeah. Yeah.
there wasn't a breeze. So the water I went past was like a mirror. I got some beautiful pictures of the mountains reflected in the water.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not a photographer. If I get a good picture, it's, because of luck.
Yeah, that part of Yosemite is just stunning everywhere. I really love that high country part of Yosemite.
Yep.
What is the next trip on your list?
Well, I've actually got a full year. I'm leaving in a couple of weeks for Abisko, the northern terminus of Kungsleden.
Uh-huh.
And my wife and I are going, and we're going to stay in the mountain station in Abisko and go up to the Aurora Sky Station, which is where they study the Aurora Borealis.
Oh, neat.
And so we're going to actually be up in that part of Sweden for about a week and a half with the guarantee, I hope, of seeing the Northern Lights firsthand.
Yeah, I don't know when this episode is going to come out, but we're talking during the winter. So you're going to be going in the middle of winter to see the Aurora Borealis.
Oh, yeah.
That's awesome.
The average high is 11 Fahrenheit.
All right, have fun.
Yeah, maybe. So then I with a group I'm in, we hike the AT, a week of the AT every summer. We've added on a winter camp out in February.
Uh-huh.
We'll just do it locally, and we're going to go back and do another few days on the Laurel Highlands hiking trail in Pennsylvania. It's a little south of Pittsburgh. I hike a week on the AT in New York with my friends,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where my friend Bao might come over. He's looking to see if he can come over and hike with that. I do Ice Age Trail day hikes when we're up in Wisconsin, and I'm hoping to do the Kings Trail again late this year in August.
Uh-huh.
If not, I want to do a couple more weeks on the Appalachian Trail down by Fontana Dam. I like my wife. That other one I didn't like, but this wife I like, and I don't know if I want to be away from her even if I hurry the trip up, it's 5 weeks that I would be away from home. And I miss her too much. So not sure if I'm going to do it now or maybe some next year.
Okay.
So,
well, that sounds like you've got a busy year planned.
oh yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Another question. What is the best campsite or backcountry spot you've ever been to?
When I first heard this, I thought my brain went immediately to Wayne National Forest. It's a huge national forest here in Ohio, and there's lots and lots of backpacking opportunities. And we were at one area with the scouts, and it was time for us to find and set up camp. And we just weren't seeing anything. They would hold all of us. And my friend Bill, who's one of the other leaders, he happened to look up. And I think in hindsight, it was probably an old logging or a mining road. It was maybe 10, 20 yards up, fairly steep side of the hill. So we had to scramble to get up there. And when we got up there, it was flat, but it was all kinds of downfall all over it. So we had to pick where we could put our tents. And we were stretched out all along this old road. And it was a blast. The view, there was no view, nothing. I mean, it was a struggle to get up to, a struggle to figure out to set up your tents. There was an area with down trees kind of in a circle where actually could make a fire in the middle and had dinner.
Uh-huh.
And it was more just the atmosphere and the camaraderie that made this thing the perfect campsite. You could never find it again.
That is a great answer. I love that because it's not a popular site that a lot of other people go to. And what you remember about it is the camaraderie,
Right.
which tells me that you're definitely more of an extrovert than a lot of hikers, because a lot of hikers wouldn't think of the social aspect of it being what's most memorable. So that's really cool that for you, that part of being out in the backcountry is important. That's really neat to hear.
Yeah, that was fun.
All right. So last question, what's the dumbest thing you've ever done while you've been hiking?
All right. So and this was dumb. On Mondays, I released my Monday mistakes where, I forgot my spoon. I had to eat with my trowel. Okay. A lot of self-deprecating humor. I'm really good with that. And I do make a lot of mistakes. Everybody does. So I just want to share that. This one was actually pretty stupid on my part. I was hiking with some guys for the first time. It was a new group of people. I've known them for a while, but the first time we ever went backpacking. And I got my ego involved. I'm a YouTuber. I'm a scout leader for a long time. I should have my act together. I should know what I'm doing. I shouldn't make stupid mistakes. I ended up running low on water, but we had talked about water. So I should not have run low on water.
Yeah.
So I didn't tell anybody I was low on water, and I just rearranged my. I rearranged.
So now the ego's getting in the way.
Yep, and I just rearranged my food. So instead of having a rehydrated meal for dinner, I ate some bars that were for the next day. Not a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So that still isn't stupid. That's just, okay, Bob, drink some water next time you get to some and drink a whole mess. And, my urine was a little bit dark. So I knew what was going on and I would be fine. What happened is that I started seeing blood in my urine.
Oh.
And I did not tell anybody because I didn't want them to think I was an idiot for getting myself into this mess. And so hopefully I learned from it. And as your listeners are thinking, don't let your ego get in the way of your health. I mean, this could have been serious as it is in a large prostate. And at my age, okay, it's not that big of a deal, but it could have been.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I really screwed up I could just take one of the guys aside and say, hey, I'm a little low on water and I'm feeling okay. And I got this going on and I didn't. And that was wrong. Yeah. I put the whole group at risk.
Right.
There's no way they're going to drag me another 4 miles out of Grayson Highlands. It's not happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as it was, I'm healthy and fine and not a big deal. But that was really stupid. I should not have done that. Forget my spoon. I don't care. I do that all the time. That's no big deal. But this was really a bad judgment.
The one time I forgot my spoon, I ended up using tent stakes as chopsticks for the rest of the trip.
Perfect.
All right. Well, on that note, Bob Delaney, thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks again to Bob Delaney for coming on the show, and I hope that we've inspired you to hike the Kungsleden. And if you enjoyed this episode, tell a friend about it, or better yet, give us a good review on whichever podcast service you use. And keep in mind that this podcast is entertainment and meant to spark your interest. If you decide to hike the trail, do your own research. Like anything else worth doing, outdoor adventure has risk. So when you go, pack your common sense. And when you get back, tell me how it went. Next time on Trails Worth Hiking, we are going back to Nepal. But this time we aren't just going to hike in the deep gorges and high elevation passes of the Himalayas amongst the highest mountains on Earth, though there will be some of that. Instead, this time we'll do an entirely different type of trek on a brand new route planned and forged by our guest. Starting on the low plains at the border of India near the city in Nepal where the Buddha was born, we'll start trekking north, working our way higher and higher through the hills of Nepal, passing through regions that are home to many different cultures along the way, until we are finally back in the high mountains where we'll reach the border with China. Next time on Trails Worth Hiking, we'll trek north across Nepal on the Nepal border-to-border thru hike. If you have any questions or feedback on this episode, or ideas for future episodes, including if you want to be a guest and talk about a trail that you've hiked, reach out to me at trailsworthhiking@gmail.com. And please follow us on Instagram at Trails Worth Hiking Podcast to see photos of the hikes. So start planning your next hike, and before you know it, you'll be on the trail. Thanks for listening.